Father's Day in Charleston had always been simple for me. A quiet meal, maybe a walk by the water, a phone call from my daughter, nothing extravagant. At 68, I didn't expect much beyond a card or a framed photo. But this year was different. Maya had married into money, real money. Her husband, Ethan Price's family, ran businesses from Miami up to Boston. Country clubs, yachts, charity galas, things that never touched the life I lived. I am a retired construction man. I'd build homes with my hands. Ethan built illusions with his smile. So when Maya invited me to their home for Father's Day brunch, I put on my cleanest shirt and drove over, trying to ignore the knot in my chest. The house was something out of a magazine. White columns, manicured lawns, glass that shimmered like it was polished hourly. As I walked in, the smell of champagne and roasted duck filled the air. Waiters in black vests floated between guests. This wasn't brunch. It was a production. "Dad!" Maya rushed over, kissed my cheek, and led me inside. She looked beautiful, as always. Bright smile, hair swept back perfectly. But behind her glow was nervous energy. Ethan's parents were already seated at the head table. His father, Gregory Price, tall and silver-haired, laughed loudly as a man in a white uniform handed him an envelope. "Gregory," Ethan announced, "this year we're sending you and Mom on a 2-week cruise through the Caribbean. First-class cabins, private chef, everything." Applause rang out around the room. Gregory beamed, slapping Ethan on the back like he'd just won the Super Bowl. And then Maya turned to me. "Dad," she said softly, handing me a small envelope, "this is for you." Inside was a single lottery ticket. For a moment, I thought it was a joke. I stared at the flimsy piece of paper, then at the roaring laughter across the table as Gregory held up his cruise voucher. "Thank you," I managed, forcing a smile. But inside, I felt the sting. I was her father, the man who raised her after her mother passed, who worked double shifts to pay for her college. Now, on Father's Day, I was worth a scratch of numbers while her in-laws sailed the seas? Ethan smirked from across the table. He didn't say a word, but his eyes told the story. Know your place, old man.
That evening, back in my modest home on the edge of town, I placed the ticket on the counter. I almost tossed it. But something, pride, curiosity, maybe stubbornness, made me check the numbers as they were drawn live on TV. Each one matched. All 6. The announcer shouted, the screen flashed, and I sat frozen. $50 million. My hands trembled as I clutched the ticket. I looked around my quiet house, the framed photo of Maya and me from her high school graduation staring back at me. I whispered aloud, "What does this mean?" The next day, Maya called. "So, did you scratch it?" she asked casually. "It wasn't a scratch-off. It was the Powerball," I replied. My voice was steady, but my chest pounded. There was silence on the line. "Oh," she said finally. "Did you win anything?" I hesitated. Enough. Ethan's voice chimed faintly in the background. "Don't tell him too much." I gripped the phone tighter. "Maya, why did you buy me that ticket?" Her laugh was nervous. "It was just for fun, Dad. You know, a little surprise." But her words rang hollow. People don't spend $10 on a lottery ticket as a placeholder gift, not when their in-laws are boarding luxury cruises. That week, I went to claim my prize. The lottery office was buzzing, cameras flashing, officials smiling for pictures. I signed the forms, took the press photo holding an oversized check, and tried to keep my expression neutral. When I returned home, envelopes filled with congratulations from strangers piled at my door. Local news stations camped outside for a quote. But the one call I didn't get, at least not right away, was from Maya. When she finally visited, Ethan came with her. He looked at my modest living room with thinly veiled disgust. "So, looks like you got lucky."
"Luck," I replied, "isn't always luck." Maya sat beside me, her hand trembling on her lap. "Dad, this is incredible. You'll never have to worry again." Her eyes darted to Ethan, who smirked again. He was the same smirk I saw across the brunch table. That night, after they left, I sat alone with the ticket in my wallet. My heart should have been light, my future secure. But instead, questions gnawed at me. Why that ticket? Why on Father's Day? And why did Ethan look like he already knew the outcome? The house was silent, yet my mind roared. A lottery win should have been freedom. Instead, it felt like a trap. Had Maya truly chosen the numbers at random? Or had someone placed that ticket in my hands with a purpose? I poured myself a glass of bourbon, staring out the window into the Charleston night. Somewhere in the distance, waves crashed softly against the harbor. I whispered to myself, this wasn't just luck. It was a move. But whose move? The ticket that was supposed to make me rich had made me suspicious. And in that moment, I realized Father's Day wasn't a celebration. It was the opening play of a game I hadn't agreed to join. If you won $50 million from a gift your child gave you, but suspected it wasn't pure luck, would you celebrate or question their motives? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and share.
The ink on my lottery paperwork was barely dry before Maya called again. "Dad, Ethan's parents want you to come over for dinner this week," she said. Her voice was bright, but I heard the sting beneath it. "Dinner," I repeated. "That's new." "They want to celebrate your win," she added quickly. "It'll be nice." I knew better. Wealthy families don't invite outsiders in unless there's a reason. And to Ethan's family, I was still an outsider. Still, I agreed. Curiosity can be a dangerous companion, but it's one I've carried all my life. Their Charleston mansion glittered as I pulled up. Valets in pressed uniforms parked cars lined with chrome. Chandeliers blazed through the tall windows like artificial suns. Inside, the dining room stretched longer than most streets I'd worked on. Polished wood, high ceilings, silverware that looked untouched by human hands. Gregory and his wife Patricia sat at the head of the table, Ethan beside them, Maya across from him. "Arthur," Gregory greeted, rising with exaggerated warmth. "Congratulations! 50 million! Why, that's quite a windfall." I shook his hand, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. Dinner began with wine, poured into glasses thin as eggshells. Lobster tail, filet mignon, dishes I could barely pronounce. The chatter revolved around markets, political donations, overseas investments. I stayed quiet, taking it in. And then Ethan turned his gaze toward me. "So, Arthur," he said, his tone smooth but sharp, "tell me, what do you plan to do with your winnings? Investments? Real estate? Or will you just keep it in a shoebox under your bed?"
The table chuckled politely. I forced a smile. "I'll manage." He leaned back in his chair. "Well, money like that doesn't last forever. People win big, they spend foolishly, and within a decade they're back where they started. It's almost tragic." Maya shifted uncomfortably, touching his arm. "Ethan." But Ethan wasn't finished. "Of course, we'd be happy to give you some guidance. Managing that kind of wealth requires expertise. Wouldn't want you making mistakes." The message was clear. In his eyes, I was unfit to handle my own fortune. After dinner, as dessert was served, Gregory lifted his glass. "To family," he toasted. "May we always protect what's ours." The words stuck with me. What's ours, not what's yours, Arthur. Later, while the guests mingled in the drawing room, I excused myself. I needed air. The hallway was dim and quiet, lined with family portraits of stern men in tailored suits. I walked slowly, letting my mind turn over Ethan's words. That's when I heard it. A voice, Ethan's, low and sharp, coming from a half-cracked door. "He's a liability. The old man doesn't belong in our circle. Maya's blinded by guilt, but I'm not. If we don't move fast, he'll drag her down with him." Another voice murmured agreement. I couldn't place it. Ethan again. "Don't worry, I'll discredit him. A few rumors about poor judgment, maybe questions about how he got that ticket. Once doubt settles in, his credibility will collapse. By year's end, no one will take him seriously, not even Maya." I froze. My hands clenched. Every word confirmed what I'd suspected. Ethan didn't just dislike me, he wanted me gone forever. I stepped back from the door before he emerged, smoothing my expression as I rejoined the group. Maya was chatting with Patricia, her smile forced. Ethan entered a minute later, his tie loosened, his face calm, as if he hadn't just plotted my destruction. He caught my eye, and for the first time, I let him see the steel in mine. Maya noticed the tension. "Dad, are you all right?" "I'm fine," I said evenly. "Dinner was enlightening." She frowned but said nothing more. When the guests began leaving, I pulled Maya aside on the veranda. The night air smelled of magnolias and salt water. "Why do you let him speak to me like that?" I asked quietly. Her eyes widened. "Dad, I mocks him. He treats me like I'm beneath him. And you," my voice broke, "you defend him." Tears welled in her eyes. "He's my husband, Dad. I can't just take sides against him. Please try to understand." I studied her face. She looked like her mother when she cried. Soft, vulnerable, desperate for peace. It broke me. "I raised you better than this," I said gently. "But if you can't see it now, you will one day." She shook her head. "You're making this harder. Ethan's just protective." Protective. That word tasted bitter.
On the drive back to my modest house, the city lights blurred past. My hands gripped the wheel, my mind replaying Ethan's callous laughter, his whispered plotting. A father shouldn't feel like a stranger in his daughter's life. Yet that night, I realized Maya was further away from me than ever. Ethan hadn't just built walls of wealth. He was building walls around her heart. And unless I acted, I would lose her completely. When I stepped into my house, the silence was heavy. I set my keys on the table, sat down, and stared at the lottery ticket still tucked safely in my wallet. It should have been my blessing. Instead, it was becoming a weapon, one Ethan intended to use against me. I whispered into the empty room. He doesn't just want my dignity, he wants me gone. And in that moment, I knew Ethan Price wasn't simply mocking me. He was preparing to erase me entirely. If your son-in-law mocked your success and plotted against you, would you stay silent or fight back? Comment your thoughts, and remember to subscribe, like, and share.
I didn't sleep that night. The echo of Ethan's voice haunted me like a splinter lodged deep beneath my skin. Discredit him. Erase him. The house was dark, but my mind was lit with fire. I knew I couldn't fight Ethan alone. not in his world, not with his resources. I needed someone who could dig beneath the glossy veneer of his wealth, someone who saw through the facades Charleston's elite paraded around in. That's when I thought of Rosa Delgado. I met Rosa years ago when she was just starting out as a reporter at the Charleston Gazette. I was working maintenance at the docks then, patching pipes and tightening bolts. But Rosa had stopped to interview the men about unfair wages. Even back then, she had a sharp eye and a sharper tongue. Now, she was respected, maybe even feared in the city. She had exposed crooked developers, shady politicians, and one pastor who'd built an empire on donations while buying himself yachts. If anyone could sniff out Ethan Price's dirt, it was Rosa. I called her the next morning. "Arthur?" she answered, her voice brisk. "Haven't heard from you in years. What's this about?" "I need your help," I said simply. We met in a corner booth at a quiet diner on East Bay Street. Rosa slid into the seat across from me, her notebook already in hand. She wore a leather jacket despite the southern heat, her hair pulled back, her eyes sharp as knives.
"You've stirred up a hornet's nest, old man," she said before I even began. 50 million? Half the city's buzzing about you." I ignored the jab. "It's not the money I'm worried about. It's my daughter's husband. Ethan Price," she said, scribbling the name instantly. "What about him?" I leaned closer. "He wants me gone. I overheard him talking, planning to ruin my credibility, maybe even more. I don't trust him, Rosa. I need to know who he really is." Her pen tapped the page. She studied me for a long moment. "You're not just paranoid." "No," my voice was firm. "Ethan doesn't just want my daughter. He wants control, and I think he's hiding something." Her eyes narrowed with interest. "You might be right. His name's crossed my desk before. Whispers of backroom deals, maybe tax evasion. Nothing I could prove, yet." Her words jolted me. Yet. She flipped her notebook shut. "All right, Arthur, I'll dig. But once I do, you need to understand, truth has consequences. If Ethan's dirty, your daughter won't just lose her husband. She'll lose the life she thinks she built." I swallowed hard. "I just want to protect her." Rosa gave a humorless smile. "Then you'd better be ready for the storm." 2 weeks later, she called. "Meet me. Urgent." We met again at the same diner, but Rosa's expression this time was graver. She dropped a manila folder on the table. "Ethan Price isn't a businessman," she said flatly. "He's a con man dressed in silk." I opened the folder. Inside were copies of financial records, offshore accounts, shell companies. Rosa flipped through them like a dealer spreading cards.
He's been moving money through fake charities, funneling cash into private accounts overseas. Half his so-called empire is built on fraud and debt. He's one scandal away from collapse. The blood drained from my face. "And Maya?" Rosa hesitated. "Her name's not on the businesses, but she's connected. Joint accounts, properties. If he goes down, she goes down with him." I sat back, the booth suddenly too small, the air too thick. My heart pounded in my chest. Exposing Ethan meant saving Maya from a man who would eventually destroy her. But it also meant shattering her marriage, humiliating her in front of Charleston's society, tearing apart the life she thought she wanted. I thought of her as a little girl clutching my hand at the county fair, begging for cotton candy. She used to say, "You're my hero, Daddy." Now, would she see me as her savior, or the man who ruined her world? "Arthur," Rosa said softly, "I need your decision. Do I keep digging, or do I walk away?" I rubbed my temples, fighting back the heaviness in my chest. "Keep digging.
I'd rather she hate me for telling the truth than love me for letting her drown." Rosa nodded once. "Then brace yourself." That night, when I returned home, something waited in my mailbox. No return address, just a small, plain postcard with a black and white picture of Charleston Harbor on the front. I turned it over. There was no message, only a single letter, scrawled in red ink. It was the letter E. My hands went cold. It wasn't from Rosa. It wasn't from Maya. Whoever sent it knew what was happening, knew Ethan was my target, and they were watching me. Would you risk exposing your child's spouse if it meant destroying their marriage, but saving them from a con man? Let me know in the comments.
The air in Nashville carried a different weight than Charleston. Bigger city, bigger stage, and for Ethan, bigger ego. He was the keynote speaker at the Southeastern Business Leaders Conference, an event streamed nationwide. Bankers, developers, tech moguls, all gathered to applaud the so-called genius who had, in truth, built his empire on sand. Maya had insisted I shouldn't come. "It's a professional event, Dad. Ethan's under pressure. Don't distract him." I told her I understood, but I went anyway. Not to clap, not to cheer. To strike. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, white linen tables, and gold-trimmed banners. Ethan stood near the stage, shaking hands like a politician. His suit was tailored, his smile polished, his voice smooth as syrup. He looked every bit the man Maya believed he was. I sat 3 rows back, quiet in my gray jacket, a plain man among peacocks. Rosa's evidence was stored on a USB drive in my pocket. Months of digging, nights of whispering phone calls, a trail of fraud so thick it could choke a courtroom. When Ethan stepped to the podium, the crowd applauded like he was royalty. Maya beamed from her seat in the front row, her hands folded neatly on her lap. She looked proud, blindly proud. I clenched my fists. This ends today. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ethan began, his voice amplified across the hall, "it's an honor to share how innovation and vision can transform industries. My journey has been about building, creating, and leaving a legacy for generations to come." Applause again. Cameras flashed. He clicked to his next slide. Charts of growth, photos of projects, fabricated success stories. He moved with confidence, charisma dripping from every gesture. But the higher the climb, the harder the fall. When he clicked for his next slide, the screens glitched. The crowd murmured. Ethan tapped the clicker again, irritation flickering across his face. Then, Rosa's files appeared. Bank statements, fake charities, transfers to offshore accounts. Ethan froze. The audience leaned forward, confusion turning to shock as slide after slide revealed his empire skeletons. His voice caught in his throat. This isn't..."
Gasps rippled across the room. Phones lit up. Some attendees began recording, others whispering furiously. A man in the back shouted, "Fraud!" The chant spread, "Fraud! Fraud! Fraud!" Ethan's composure cracked like glass. His face flushed red, sweat trickling down his temple. "This is slander, a setup!" But the screens kept rolling. Contracts with forged signatures, receipts of payments funneled through children's charities, shell corporations with his name stamped on every line. Security rushed toward the stage, unsure whether to protect him or drag him away. Maya stood frozen. Her eyes darted between her husband on stage and the evidence on screen. I could see the moment the truth struck her, the way her shoulders sagged, her lips parted in disbelief. Her father had been right. Her husband was a fraud. By the time Ethan stormed off stage, the conference was chaos. Reporters swarmed. Investors whispered in furious circles. The conference chairman announced an investigation. I slipped out quietly, heart pounding in my chest. The strike had landed. Ethan's empire was cracked wide open. But the victory didn't taste sweet, because I'd seen Maya's face. Humiliation burned on her cheeks. Betrayal clouded her eyes. She hadn't looked at me as a savior. She looked at me as the man who destroyed her world. That night, I returned to my modest Charleston home. For the first time in months, I allowed myself a sigh of relief. But the relief didn't last.
An envelope waited on my porch. No return address, just my name scrawled across the front. Inside was a photo. It was me and Hank, my younger brother, taken years ago at a fishing dock in Savannah. We were laughing, holding up a striped bass between us, a moment of family, a memory I thought was buried with time. But across the bottom of the photo, written in jagged black marker, were 3 words. He's next. Watch. My hands trembled as I stared at Hank's face. I hadn't spoken to him in years, not since the bitter fallout over Dad's will, not since he vanished into a different life. Now, someone was dragging him into the war I thought was only mine. And the message was clear. The first blow had landed against Ethan, but the real enemy had just stepped out of the shadows. If you had the chance to publicly humiliate the person who tried to erase you, would you take it or let karma handle it? Comment below and make sure you subscribe, like, and share.
Winning $50 million should have been a blessing. Instead, it became a curse that poisoned every corner of my life. Ethan wasn't finished, not by a long shot. Within a week of the Nashville conference, my name began appearing in whispers and headlines, not about Ethan, about me. The Charleston Chronicle ran a piece hinting that my lottery win was suspicious, as if I'd cheated the system. An anonymous blogger posted that I'd hidden criminal charges in my past. Even an old photo of me getting escorted from a protest decades ago suddenly appeared online with the caption, "Ex-con strikes it rich." I knew whose hands were behind it. Ethan's. He might have been wounded, but he was still dangerous. At the grocery store, neighbors stared at me differently. The cashier who'd once chatted with me about baseball now mumbled and avoided eye contact. Winning had put me on a pedestal. Ethan's lies were pulling me off it. But the walls were closing in on him, too. Banks froze his accounts pending investigation. Clients began terminating contracts. Developers stopped returning calls. Ethan's empire, once untouchable, was crumbling faster than I'd imagined. I watched him on the evening news, dodging reporters outside his gated mansion. The man who had once mocked me with smug confidence now looked haggard, his tie loosened, his hair unkempt. Still, he fought like a cornered animal, using every weapon left, including my daughter. It was Maya who came to me one rainy night, her hands trembling as she stood on my porch. "Dad, please," her voice cracked. "You've made your point. Ethan's life is in ruins. Do you have to keep pressing? He's still my husband."
I studied her, my heart aching at the pain in her eyes. She looked smaller somehow, as if the weight of his scandals had bent her spine. "Maya," I said gently, "I'm not pressing anything. The truth is pressing him. You're just seeing it for what it is." She shook her head fiercely. "No, you're feeding it. Rosa, the leaks, the evidence, it all comes back to you. If you keep going, you'll destroy me along with him." Her words cut deeper than Ethan's schemes ever could. I wanted to take her hands, to remind her I was the man who raised her, who stayed when her mother died, who gave up everything to keep her safe. But in her eyes, I wasn't her father anymore.
I was the enemy who'd exposed her husband. When she left, I sat in the quiet, wondering if winning that ticket had cursed me with the loss of the one person I wanted to protect most. Days later, Rosa called. "Arthur, I found something, and it's bad." Her tone was different this time, sharper, heavier. I met her at her office downtown, stacks of papers and hard drives scattered across her desk. She looked up at me, her expression unreadable. "Arthur, Ethan didn't act alone." "What do you mean?" I asked slowly. She slid a folder toward me. Inside were email transcripts, phone records, and notes. At the center of it all was a name I hadn't spoken in years. Hank, my younger brother. I felt my stomach twist as Rosa explained. "Hank's been feeding Ethan information for years about your work history, your finances, even family matters. He gave Ethan the ammunition to smear you. Without Hank, Ethan wouldn't have had half the leverage he used against you." I stared at the records in disbelief. There it was, my own brother's phone number, linked to calls with Ethan, payments transferred discreetly to Hank's account. The phishing photo, the warning on the back, it all made sense now. It wasn't just Ethan who wanted me erased, it was my own blood. My mind raced back through the years, our fights over Dad's inheritance, Hank storming out, promising I'd regret crossing him. I thought time had buried the feud. Instead, it had festered, turned into something venomous. I gripped the folder so tightly my knuckles went white. My voice came out low, almost a growl. "Hank sold me out." Rosa leaned forward, her gaze steady. "Arthur, you need to understand. If Hank's been working with Ethan this long, he's not just a bystander. He's part of the war. And if he's willing to betray his own brother, what else is he willing to do?" That night, I couldn't shake the image of Hank's face from my mind. The same brother who once shared a bunk bed with me. The same boy who'd cried at our mother's funeral. The same man who now worked hand in hand with the enemy who wanted me gone. Blood and betrayal, the two cuts you never see coming. I stared at the folder again before locking it in my desk. Ethan had wounded me, but Hank's betrayal was something deeper. And I knew one thing with certainty. If I didn't move carefully, this curse of a lottery win wouldn't just cost me Maya, it would bury me entirely. How would you react if you discovered your own sibling betrayed you to your worst enemy? Tell me in the comments, because right now, I feel so bad.
Charleston sparkled that night. The historic district buzzed with limousines, cameras, and the soft hum of jazz pouring out from the grand ballroom of the Whittemore Hotel. Lena Cross, the queen of Charleston philanthropy, was hosting her annual charity gala, and half the city's power players had gathered to sip champagne and flaunt their wealth. And at the center of it all, trying to crawl back into society's graces, was Ethan Price. I spotted him near the stage, his suit pressed sharp, his smile painted on like a mask. He shook hands, laughed too loudly, promised big donations to Lena's foundation. To the untrained eye, he looked like he was bouncing back. But I knew better. Behind the glassy charm, Ethan's empire was fractured. His clients had fled, his investors were gone, and the banks were circling like vultures. Tonight was his Hail Mary, an attempt to prove he was still untouchable. Maya was there too, dressed in emerald silk, clinging to Ethan's arm with a brittle smile. She looked exhausted, as if every breath was a performance. And then, in the corner of the room, I saw him. Hank, my brother. His hair was thinner, his suit ill-fitting, but his eyes darted with nervous energy.
I hadn't spoken to him in years, and now here he was, orbiting Ethan like a shadow. Lena Cross stepped onto the stage, her voice elegant and commanding. Tonight we celebrate generosity and the leaders who make Charleston proud. Please welcome Ethan Price. Polite applause rippled through the crowd as Ethan approached the microphone. He began his speech, words oozing with charm about restoring trust and building community. That was the moment Rose's plan went live. The screens behind Ethan flickered. His slideshow of philanthropic promises vanished. In its place appeared spreadsheets, debt notices, loan defaults, and then Hank's name. Gasps filled the room. One by one, documents scrolled across the giant screens. Unpaid loans in Hank's name, secret payments from Ethan to Hank, emails linking my brother directly to Ethan's schemes.
The whispers turned into a roar. Guests pulled out their phones, snapping photos, recording video. Lena Cross herself stepped back in disgust. Ethan froze. His eyes darted to Hank, who stood pale and trembling in the corner. The crowd wasn't just turning on Ethan anymore. They were turning on both men. "Frauds! Both of them!" someone shouted. "Stealing from charity?" another cried. The gala dissolved into chaos. Security moved in, cameras rolled, and the golden veneer Ethan had tried to rebuild shattered completely. I watched it all unfold, standing still as marble, while the city's elite feasted on Ethan and Hank like sharks scenting blood. For once, I didn't need to swing the hammer. The truth did the work for me. Later that night, after the guests scattered and Ethan disappeared in disgrace, I found Hank alone in the hotel's side courtyard. He sat on a stone bench, his head in his hands, sweat soaking his shirt collar. I approached slowly. "You always wanted attention, Hank. Tonight, you got it." He looked up, his eyes red. "You think you won? You think humiliating me fixes anything?" I stood over him, my voice steady. "I didn't ruin you. You did that yourself. I just let the world see who you really are." His face twisted with pain. "So what now? You're going to destroy me completely? Leave me with nothing?" I leaned closer. "No, Hank, I won't ruin you. I want you to live with it. Live every day knowing Charleston sees you as a traitor. That's a punishment worse than anything I could do." He flinched, as if the words were a blade. For a long moment, he was silent. Then Hank's shoulders shook. A broken laugh slipped from his throat before turning into sobs. Finally, he lifted his head and whispered, his voice raw, "Arthur, you don't know who gave you that lottery ticket." The words hit me harder than anything Ethan had ever said. My stomach knotted, my breath caught. "What are you talking about?" I demanded. But Hank only shook his head, tears streaking down his face. "I'm not the one you should be afraid of."
The headlines hit Nashville like a thunderclap. Ethan Price indicted on 47 counts of fraud. News anchors replayed the footage from Lena Cross's gala, Ethan's frozen smile unraveling as his secrets bled across the giant screens. Investors sued him, banks locked down his accounts, and federal prosecutors swarmed his crumbling empire. For years he had played the part of a king. Now he was nothing but a man in handcuffs. And yet, for all his noise, the silence afterward felt louder. I watched the coverage from my study, the television casting blue light across the wood-paneled room. Ethan's lawyers tried to spin the story, but the evidence was too strong. His empire was dust, his reputation ash. Maya came by one evening, her eyes hollow, her once bright spirit dimmed by the wreckage of her marriage. She stood in my doorway, clutching her coat as if it held her together. "Dad," she whispered, "he's gone. Everything we built, everything I believed in, it's all gone." I nodded, letting her speak. Her voice broke. "Tell me the truth. Is forgiveness still possible? For him? For me?" I looked at her, the daughter I had raised, the woman caught between loyalty and truth. My chest ached with words I couldn't form. Instead of answering, I turned my gaze to the window. Outside, the world kept moving. Cars passing, streetlights glowing, life indifferent to our pain. Maya waited, tears slipping down her cheeks. When I didn't speak, she finally left, closing the door softly behind her. Some questions don't deserve easy answers. Weeks later, I came home to find a small, battered envelope on my doorstep. No return address. I carried it inside, my hands steady but my heartbeat racing. Inside was an old lottery ticket. Expired, worthless, and a single note written in neat block letters. "There are always more numbers." I stared at it, my throat dry. The ticket wasn't random. It was deliberate. A message threaded into my life like a needle pulling at a seam. The memory of Hank's broken voice echoed in my mind. "Arthur, you don't know who gave you that lottery ticket." For years, I believed that ticket was luck, a twist of fate that lifted me from ordinary to extraordinary. But now, staring at the faded paper, I felt a darker truth clawing at me. Someone had planned this. Someone had given me that ticket for a reason. Ethan was destroyed. Hank was disgraced. My revenge was complete. But the board wasn't empty. There was still another player, and they had just made their move. Revenge doesn't always end with justice. Sometimes it ends with silence, shadows, and questions that may never be answered. Because no matter how many enemies fall, someone else is always waiting in the dark, rolling the dice, drawing the next number. If you won $50 million but discovered the ticket was part of a larger game, would you keep the money or chase the truth? Comment below and make sure to subscribe, like, and share for more stories. Thank you for watching, and see you in my next video.